So allow me to invite our next keynote speaker, who is very common to all of us, Dr. Million Belay. Dr. Belay is the General Coordinator of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, AFSA. I wanted to say a lot more about him, but he said no, he's known very much by everyone here. So welcome, Dr. Belay, to make your presentation, and after that, we'll welcome the next speaker, and from there, we have some questions being put to you by the delegates. Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, my brother David. Thank you very much for inviting me. As they say, agroecology stands on 3 feet, you know. 1 feet is a practice of agroecology. Another feet is on science. I think in this conference, both of them are very well represented. I was reading some of the posters here, and I was amazed, and I attended some of the sessions. What you are doing, what everybody is doing is really, really excellent. Very encouraging process. What is not reflected that much here is the social movement side, the political side of agroecology. So why do we need social movements? And what I'm trying to do is to make you a little bit angry with what's happening around us. And also, you know, I will talk about AFSA, what we are proposing. You know, it's not only, you know, throwing rotten tomatoes, rotten eggs, or whatever. But so what? You know, if you ask us so what question, we try to present some solutions also. So why social movements are crucial to Africa? So let's go back to history a little bit. I think there is no. Do you hear me? There is no question that these are our challenges. Population explosion, I know the theory that, you know, population is not necessarily a problem. I do believe that. But sometimes if you don't know how to use your own population, it can be a problem. Land and forest degradation, decreasing biodiversity, cultural erosion. This is very close to my heart, cultural erosion. Unplanned urbanization. Urbanization is very much important, but when it is unplanned, it's disasters, as you know, climate change. So how can we address these challenges in agriculture? You know, those problems, you can address them in so many ways. Is it by producing more food? Yeah, but is it by producing more food which is nutritious and healthy? By the way, most of the policies now in Africa are trying to address the first and the second one. Mainly the first, producing more food. Is it by producing more food, which is nutritious and healthy, without affecting the biosphere? We don't have so many policies which address the third question. But we can make our questions much more complex, you know? Producing more nutritious, healthy, and culturally appropriate food. Cultural appropriateness is very, very, very much critical. You know, I am traveling all over Africa, and I'm really amazed by the diversity in our foods, which is related to the diversity in our culture. So cultural appropriateness is very much important. But the last one is so critical, and I don't see it addressed. There's the last two questions by any policy up to now. Is it producing more nutritious, healthy, culturally appropriate food without affecting the biosphere in a justice way? Justice is a very, very important question. That's where social movements mostly come in, and the right to food is a very critical agenda for social movements. So let me talk about the battle of narratives. You know, there are two narratives, and there is a battle. Well, the source of this battle is, you know, Malthus. You know, the Thomas Malthus, he said that, you know, it's a 19th century economy because population grows geometrically and food production arithmetically. Famine was inevitable, you know, that Malthusian catastrophe. As you know, so many scientists took their theories out of that, including the theory of evolution. So he suggested decrease in population as a solution. Later, Norman Bullock came, no. I think it is possible to produce more food even if the population increases. So that's where the Green Revolution comes. Population can increase at, whatever it like, but we can produce more food. Through what? Through Green Revolution. What is Green Revolution basically? These are the techniques of Green Revolution. New improved varieties. Under this will be genetically modified crops, now also gene-edited crops, Application of new agricultural techniques, all this, irrigation, mechanization, use of agrochemicals, focus on few and market value crops. Mostly, in most of the cases, there are other sides of the Green Revolution. It's based on the neoliberal agenda in general, but these are the majority of them. So what happened? What happened because of the Green Revolution? Where it has happened, especially India and Mexico, in some Southeast Asian countries, well, it has increased productivity for some time. Even that increased productivity is contested now by some Indian anthropologists. Is the increase in productivity in India because of the Green Revolution, or is it because of the implementation of one technology, which is called tube wells? Tube wells. So even that narrative is contested now. So what happened to mainly Indian farmers? In India, even now, after the application of Green Revolution, I don't know which percent, 40-something% of the population is undernourished. So it favored farmers who could afford high-yielding varieties, agrochemicals, machine, and irrigation facilities. Mostly it favored some. And it indebted farmers, and they lost their properties and migrated to cities. New monocrops faced resistance to pests and weeds, super weeds, It resulted in ecological disaster. I think this is all recorded. It oriented in cash crops and not food for domestic consumption, resulted in nutrition and health crisis, and resulted in cultural erosion. That's the experience in India mostly, partly also in Mexico. Okay, what are the narratives driving the Green Revolution agenda in Africa? That is, we're talking about our own continent. So what are the narratives? The first one is over-reliance on the role of the private sector. Everywhere you think the private sector is important, well, it can be important. And there are a lot of public-private partnerships signed between governments and lots of industries and corporations. And mostly unaccountable, that nobody knows what's happening. And mostly, detrimental to the relationships between to the country that they are implemented. We have to change a number of our policies and institutional mechanisms to make it possible for these companies to invest. We have to change our seed laws, we have to change our biosafety regulations, we have to change our fertilizer regulations. It's happening. It's happening through institutions. And Green Revolution is mainly about technical solutions like machines, training, a battery of scientists who could serve the system and supporting those institutions with money to support the system. And infrastructural developments. Mainly, these infrastructural developments are done along the corridors of commodity crops. So that is what one of the narratives. The second is the Green Revolution said that farmers' seeds, varieties, and systems are not high-yielding or genetically inferior and cannot feed the world. And we need to bring new seeds with technologies to feed Africa. This is one of the strongest narratives. Nobody is romanticizing the seeds that we have, but it is possible to enhance the productivity of our seeds without losing diversity. And that is tried and worked but there is minute funding for this kind of activity. Minute. The other narrative, all land should be given to those who can use it. And these are mostly the large-scale producers. So this is what is promoting land grabbing in Africa, mostly by companies and by some countries. We have to produce enough calories in an economically efficient way to achieve food security, therefore must use primarily the highest potential crops. That is where the focus on maize comes from, mainly in Africa. Support for few crops, 2-3 crops, so that you feed Africans, calorie-rich crops. And this doesn't address, as you know, the nutrition crisis that we are having. And innovation and useful knowledge comes only from science driven by experts, results. And this has resulted in neglect of traditional ecological knowledge. Farmers have knowledge, which comes from two sources. One source is, inheritance from tradition, from generation to generation. The other is they practice. They practice the changing climatic conditions, changing social conditions, and they respond through innovations. But Green Revolution actually ignores that. And technology is always presented as a solution. Wherever problem you have, technology will solve it. And it is possible to develop standardized one-size-fits-all solutions to be applied and replicated widely. That's where the harmonization of seed laws, biosafety laws in Africa comes from. That's where the Alliance for African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, ARIPO is trying to harmonize our seed laws. That's where the CADA process comes from, That's where AGRA is supporting, pushing this agenda. Experience in Africa, Green Revolution. AGRA was created, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa was created. I think they don't call themselves anymore Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. They only call themselves AGRA because they are abandoning Green Revolution, which is very good news. 1 billion funding, major funder is Bill Gates. He gave 520 million grants. So when it was started in 2006, the promise was to double productivity, double income, have food security by 30 million smallholder farmers, all that. And these are the countries where it was implemented. What is the result? No evidence of 100 increase, no evidence of doubling productivity. Maize was a favored crop, as I said, and the increase is only 29%. Overall staple yield up only 18%. Subsidies expanding land planted to favored crops. No yields basically. No evidence of income doubling. Poverty is still high. No evidence of improved food security. 31% increase in number of undernourished people in AGRA countries. Only 4 AGRA countries showed a decline. In 9, it increased. And it resulted in erosion of local varieties. You see, cassava by 6%, roots and tubers by 7%, sorghum by 3%, groundnuts 23%. So, in general, the initiative did not succeed. So, Green Revolution has failed. So, question is, why is it, where in all countries, including developing countries, agricultural productivity or growth in agriculture increases, and why is it going down in sub-Saharan Africa? Why? What is the reason? I think we have to go back to history to some extent to answer this question. I think before the arrival of European ships to the shores of Africa, there is an economic system, a sophisticated economic system, a governance system, a trade system, as you can see. I'm not saying this because I'm an African or I'm an African activist. I think you can go and read books and after books. This is well-documented reality. We had a system. Then after colonialism, that's all destroyed, and what we are organized as Africa to send commodities to European countries. So historically, Africa is destroyed. You know, food system governance existed, European maritime influence, colonialism came. Colonialism basically organized African food system to benefit the colonial countries, you know, those countries who have sat in Germany and divided by line, divided Africa. So that has happened. But in addition to doing that, they destroyed the local system. They both destroyed the local system and reshaped African agriculture to export to the outside world. And post-independence, what has happened in post-independence? Did our agricultural productivity or agricultural management or governance, has it improved or has it continued? That's actually the question. I think it has gone down very much. Debt. I will explain a little more. There is one session where Hans will be presenting also around the relationship between debt and why we are here. That will be presented. And a new research finding has, a publication has gone out. He's going to present it. But post-independence, structural adjustment by IMF and World Bank has killed so many African countries, and debt by governments has killed many of the African countries. They are still wallowing in debt. So I think we have seen this when Hans was presenting, where the power, concentration of power by so many few. No, David, we have only one presenting on social side of activism. I will use my time. I'm sorry, my brother. So concentration of power is part of the problem. Past dependency is also part of the problem. What do we mean? 3 companies control 50% of commercial seed market, and that's increasing. 7 companies control nearly 100% of fertilizer sales. 5 companies share 68% of agroecological market. 4 firms account to 97% of private research and development in poultry. 4 firms control up to 90% of the global grain trade. So this concentration is part of the huge problem. You know, so many companies, but few of them are leading the market. So this diagram, you will see it also when Hans was presenting it, you know. It shows the relationship between unsustainable food system and unsustainable debt. Most African governments, as I speak now, cannot invest in agriculture or in agroecology, in whatever, in Africa. Why? They are trapped in debt. Most of them borrow to pay, and they are borrowing 8 times than other countries, you know, when we pay. So all this, that, you know, climate breakdown. For example, we have a climate crisis in Malawi right now. You know, what's happening? A lot of people have lost their life. A lot of agriculture is destroyed. But can a Malawian government spend some money to get people out of this crisis? No. Why? Because they have to pay debt. So that's where we are as a continent. In the climate, this misguided narrative that I talked about, the climate smart agriculture, geoengineering, genetically modified organisms to increase productivity, nature-based solutions, all that false solution. These are the climate. I could have gone deeper into them. I know some of you here practice the climate smart agriculture, but we can argue, and I have a reason for saying this. And my question came when the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture was founded, And who are the members of this alliance? Monsanto and Yara. So AFSA is a broad-based alliance. I'm finishing, David. It's a broad-based social movement. We have 50 members. When I say broad-based, we have farmers' organizations, farmers' networks, fisher folk networks, pastoralist networks, indigenous peoples networks, women networks, youth networks, faith-based institutions, and also I have a range of civil society organizations. So it's broad-based. And food sovereignty is our guiding concept. Unfortunately, African Development Bank and others are co-opting this name, food sovereignty. Very sad. Purpose is to create a single and loud voice on issues that matter in Africa. This is our theory of change. Centrally, we work for transition to agroecology. We do our research and publication, and we do policy advocacy. We do build the movement, and we do also raise the consciousness of African people. So, I'm finalizing. We do work on two hands. On one hand, we resist. On one hand, we provide a solution as a network. We resist, For example, recently we are reactive to the African Development Bank. African Development Bank organized a meeting quite recently in Dakar, and they called it something food sovereignty something. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, it's a green revolution agenda. So we produced the statement. So we produced a range of a number of statements. Quite recently, the Kenyan government lifted a 10-year ban on GMOs. So we supported the local, highly mobilized in Surubiba actors in Kenya. We tracked African Union and EU relationships. We participate in that and we track that. We track money flows. Where is money coming to Africa and what is this money doing in Africa? That's why we wrote letters to the funders of the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. We are very much active in communication. Solutions. Farmers manage system. This is a very critical agenda for us. We have even started a campaign. We've produced a legislation, a legislation framework for farmers managed system in Africa. And we are working with our governments to accept this legislation and to make it part of their law. Healthy soil and healthy food. We are working in 15 African countries where African farmers come together and they exchange their practices. They are given money to increase their capacity. And we have created a relationship with our Indian partners, the community-based natural farming. And we have already signed an agreement with them, and we are working with them. So this is the practical side of agroecology. African agroecological entrepreneurship, Ruth is here. She's leading that program. This is a very critical program. We are working with African entrepreneurs. Promoting territorial markets. Territorial markets are markets closer to the people. They are very critical markets. And we are working on that. Integrating agroecology into climate policies. Very much important. We have started a campaign which we call My Food is African. This is happening in 17 African countries. We are working for African level food policy. We mobilize the base, we work with the base, and we educate through communication. So agroecology, this is the last one. Agroecology, I'm so happy to see all of you, all of the presentations, so much happening. This is a movement, this is a freedom movement. That's how I see it, the freedom. If we really implement agroecology, we'll be free to feed ourselves without the debt and whatever issues. So agroecology is entering into higher education system. So many of them have agroecology as a curriculum. More and more governments are endorsing it. You have heard yesterday the Ugandan government endorsing it. Scientific institutions increasingly engaged with it. Donor community, I know GIZ is supporting, SDC is supporting agroecology. Philanthropy is increasingly coming as a wave. That's very much important. UN bodies including FAO, IFAD, and WFP are engaged with it. I heard yesterday that from Imaz that UNDP is even endorsing agroecology. Current pandemic and conflict is supporting it. Health crisis driving consumers to agroecology. Social movements, all of us are mobilizing. It's appearing also in international conventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.